Kenya briefing paper. Welcome, Edgar.
Yeah, thank you so much. The chief guest in absentia, Dr. Musalia Mudavadi, Principal Secretary, State Department of Internal Security and National Administration, Dr. Raymond Omolo, present here with us, all government officials present, county governments represented here, country directors present, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Good morning. I'm going to make a brief presentation on a piece of work that we did on Kenya food systems, and I'm also going to present a little bit on the pathways to sustainability and how that links to sustainable development goals. Okay, as we wait for that to come up. Edgar Okoth and my colleague Clementina Angina will also be joining us to support in answering questions and also in just engagement in terms of the work that we did. Okay, so I'm going to look at 6 key areas that are going to make my presentation. One is the definition of the food systems, and we try to make it as simple as possible. And then we look at the overview of the food systems. And we're going to look at the country nutrition situation, both wasting and stunting in relation to the just released KDHS. And then discuss a little bit on the roadmap to sustainable food systems and then opportunities. And then I'll finalize with the recommendations that will help us in terms of ensuring that we have sustainable and transformative food systems. Okay, so I'll just proceed because of time, so I think we're facing some technical issues. So when we talk about food systems, what is our understanding, or what is the basic understanding of food systems? So we look at food systems as a combination of actors and also food commodities and interactions along the food value chain. So when we're talking about the food value chain, we look at food production, and this is looking at farmland, and that is access to this farmland, and it should be equitable. We are looking at input, supply. We are looking at transportation. We are looking at processing, retailing, wholesaling, food consumption, and waste. I know all along we've been talking about from farm to fork, but then food systems goes beyond that. And we also look at food wastes. There are a number of drivers that influence the food systems, and these are quality governance issues, natural resources, and this we're looking at land, we're looking at water, are conflict, climate change, population growth, cultural norms, technological development, taxes, and in our country we're looking at taxes across counties, the county boundaries. We are looking at developed market systems, we are looking at trade patterns, and there are also a myriad of other issues that we look at, because these are issues that affect outcomes of food systems. So what is a good food system? So a good food system is one that must deliver healthy, nutritious, and affordable food in a sustainable way. As the country director has said, that we need food that we can all afford, not just a particular segment of the population. So what does it mean by sustainable food system? So there are 3 elements of sustainable food systems. One is that it needs to be inclusive. So it needs to be a food system that encompasses the vulnerable. We are looking at women, we are looking at the youth, we are looking at people living with disability. And then 2, it needs to be able to withstand shocks and be able to recover from it. And all of us were here during the COVID-19, and you saw the way it interfered with our food system. So, looking at climate change, sustainable food systems need to be able to, thank you so much. Sustainable food system needs to be able to recover disruptions. Talking about sustainable food systems, it's a food system that does not compromise the future generation. As someone said, is that we are living in a world that we've borrowed from our children. So as we go into the sustainable food systems, we need to be able to have food that will also be able to support the future generation. Sustainable food systems and the SDGs is that our sustainable food systems don't just help in terms of ending hunger, but it needs to be able to contribute to all the 17 sustainable goals. However, sustainable food systems have direct contribution to 4 of the 17 sustainable development goals. That is goal number 1, which is no poverty, goal number 2, which is zero hunger, and then goal number 3, which is good health and well-being, and then goal number 12, which is responsible consumption and production. So let us get back home and look at our food systems here in Kenya. Our food system in Kenya is much more agriculture-based, and it contributes to 22.4% of our GDP, which is huge. And that really reemphasizes why we really need to look at our food systems in Kenya. It employs more than 40% of the general population. But then when now we go back to the rural setup, it actually employs more than 70% of the rural people. And looking at the food systems, if we just be able to work on it, then we can take care of the high unemployment rate that we have in Kenya. However, there are inefficiencies in the supply chain that leads to loss of perishable and nutrition-dense foods. In Kenya, food security has remained a perennial problem, and year in, year out, we talk about people not able to access food, and we also talk about issues at the northern area where we have to contribute to the population. However, Kenya has done quite remarkable work in terms of ensuring that they put in actions in place that could ensure that we have enough food in Kenya. However, because of the population growth, there is persistent malnutrition that we witness in Kenya. So the next slide will just show us what's happening in Kenya currently in terms of the stunting rates and also in terms of the wasting rates. As you can see, the two maps, they are really multicolored, and this clearly shows that something needs to be done in terms of working on our food systems. The map on the left, on my left, shows the stunting rates, and we have Kisumu County that has got 9% stunting rates. And why do we talk about stunting? Stunting is a measure and also a marker, is a maker and marker of development. So in counties where we have the high stunting rates, then you'll realize that development also has issues, and it's also a measure of whether a child will live to their full potential or not. So we have Kisumu County with 9%. I think Kisumu County needs to tell us what they're doing that has reduced the stunting rates dramatically. And then we have counties that have high stunting rates as 37%, Kilifi. So you can see the disparities between those two counties, and among others, West Pokot with 34%. The map on the right looks at the GAM rates. So GAM rates is both acute malnutrition, but also the moderate malnutrition. And as you can see, the northern side of Kenya shows very high gum rates. And this shows how wasting is actually affecting the northern areas. So you can imagine a combination of two, a county that has got both high stunting rates and also has got high wasting rates or high gum rates. So that is something that we really need to be able to look at. So the next one just shows in terms of how the country has been working on reducing stunting, wasting, and overweight. So you can see over the years, Kenya has put in a lot of efforts in terms of reducing stunting, but still more needs to be done. And our wasting rates is slightly starting to go high. I think it's because of the drought, the protracted drought that we've been witnessing over the years. And then you can see overweight is also here with us. And that's why we say we have the triple burden of malnutrition. And I know if you can go around the room, our waistlines will indicate how we are doing. So what is it that we can do, or what is it that Kenya has done in terms of ensuring that we are on the right road to sustainable food systems? 5 things. One is the Constitution. I think the Constitution gives us enough latitude to be able to put the government accountable and has outlined what needs to be done in terms of the rights that we have. The current government has outlined very clearly in their manifesto to eradicate malnutrition. And I think that's a very good roadmap that we can use. We also had in 2021, we went around the country to be able to have dialogues with various regional economic blocs in terms of coming up with game-changing solutions on what needs to be done on our food systems. And then the president in 2021 made very clear commitments, and there were 8 commitments that were very clear in terms of how we can transform our food systems. And also in the same year, the national government with other partners also made very clear commitments in terms of how we can tackle malnutrition. This is just some of the regional economic bloc dialogues that we had on food systems, looking at the challenges and the opportunities that exist. And I'll just run through some of the challenges that we have. So one is non-inclusive food systems, where we realize that the most vulnerable are not included within the food value chain. And mostly women are in terms of the lower level in terms of production, but at the higher level they're not included. The underdeveloped market systems also affect us. The high vulnerability of external shocks, climate change, COVID-19 and the rest. And then the siloed food governance, and this is whereby currently we do not have a platform where all stakeholders can actually engage. So that's something that we also need to follow up. And then inadequate financing. So public financing is not adequate to be able to support food system transformation. And then high burden of malnutrition, because we realize that almost half the country is affected. And then, so in terms of a recommendation of what really needs to happen for us to strengthen our food systems is: 1, let us strengthen inclusive market systems. 2, we need to include smallholders and marginalized groups in the food systems. And I just want to pause just for a second and thank the government, because we've started the registration of farmers. I think that's one of the steps of knowing who the real farmers are, both smallholders and also the large scale. And then also we need to leverage enabling coherent and policy and legal framework. And so, Dr. Raymond, this is one thing that we'll want to follow up with you in terms of how can we ensure that there is coherence policies that reinforce one another, both at national and at county level. We need to encourage collection, analysis, and use of research data. Right now, data is the new gold. So as a country, we need to be able to adopt and be able to use data. And we need to be able to have adequate financing, and public financing is really critical, because then this is what will also motivate the private financiers in terms of enabling us to be able to adopt our food systems. But then the money, we also need to be accountable for it. Allocation is one thing, but also we need to be accountable for the public financing that goes into our food systems. So with that, I want to thank you all.
All right. All right. Once more, let us appreciate Edgar Okoth, who is the consultant, giving us the ins and outs on matters food systems and our road to sustainable food systems. 22.4% contribution towards GDP, 40% employment. And the struggle that we're facing in this country with unemployment. Imagine if we streamline the food system. It will even create more employment in that line. So there is hope, ladies and gentlemen. Do not give up, all right? Tell your neighbor there is hope. But that hope needs a little bit of action. That's why we are here this morning. At this particular moment, I'd like to welcome Mr. Stephen Jackson, who is the UN resident coordinator in Kenya, to give a brief remark. Welcome, sir. Okay. There you go.
Good morning, everyone. So yesterday, we had the honor to receive His Excellency the Deputy President for the first official visit by him in that capacity to the United Nations in Gigiri, our global headquarters in Gigiri. And I thought I would start with what he said, because he had very stark words for the situation confronting Kenya. He said that this devastating, unprecedented drought means, quotes, that Kenya is bleeding from the climate emergency. This morning we've gathered to absorb the latest evidence of the challenges our world, our continent and this country are facing, and yes, there is hope, but frankly for now the evidence is dire. So, my brother, P.S. Raymond Omolo, Dr. Raymond Omolo, my sisters, the EU Deputy Ambassador Katrin Hagemann, Carla Mukaviv, FAO, Mariatu Kamara of IFAD, Amina, where are you, my sister? Amina Mohammed, Regional Director for Concern, Arshad and Kelvin from Concern and from Welthungerhilfe, Excellencies, friends, we've just heard the evidence. Kenya's food systems are still fragile. They're impressive, but they're still fragile, and they are highly vulnerable to the kinds of external shocks that both the global financial meltdown, but more particularly this climate emergency are inflicting. We are, as you know, we're already through 4 sequential failed rainy seasons in Kenya. Next week we will be getting the results of the short rains assessment that I think will confirm that the 5th season failed. We're basically in the middle of an unprecedented situation. This has never happened before, 5 failed rainy seasons. And as you've just heard from the numbers, Kenya's smallholder producers, agropastoral and pastoral communities are the most deeply affected, as of course they depend on rain-fed agriculture and therefore for sufficient pastures. And they've been impacted by fuel and fertilizer price shocks. But they're not alone. The urban populations, those living in the informal urban settlements across the country, are also at particularly high risk due to the knock-on effects of all of those and consequential rises in living costs. Food inflation here in Kenya last year reached more than 15.5%. That's very, very significant. The increasing current account deficit driven by increasing import bills and the strong dollar together are depreciating the shilling. The shilling lost 17% compared to the US dollar since 2020. It's great for people like me earning foreign currency, but it's really tough for the wananchi. Temperature rises. Kenya is looking at a more than 1.4 degree increase by 2030, higher and more extreme temperatures across the north and the northeast. And of course, that leads to rising demand for safe water for human consumption, livestock, agricultural production, and unprecedented pressure on natural resources and pastures. So friends, it's against this pretty sobering outlook that we are gathered today to hear the evidence from this Global Hunger Index report. And I really want to congratulate Concern worldwide. Of course, I'm a little bit biased as an Irishman, Concern being an NGO with global reach, but that was born in my home city of Dublin. and also Welthungerhilfe, for giving us this amazing tool that is the GHI. It's not just a passive monitoring instrument. It's a means for, I would say, active and necessarily angry advocacy at this point, because the GHI reflects both the scandal of alarmingly growing hunger in our world and in too many countries, but also the erasure of the gains that we have been making since the Millennium Summit in 2000 because of these new crises. So even as our hearts go out today, as I'm sure they do, to those suffering the impacts of the prolonged conflicts in Ukraine, in Syria, in Yemen, in Afghanistan and elsewhere, and now equally to those very tragically impacted by the incredible earthquake in Turkey and Syria in the last few days, even as our hearts go out to them, we cannot and we will not forget that globally hunger is hitting levels that have never been seen before. Speaking at the launch of the Global Humanitarian Overview for 2023, just a couple of months ago, our United Nations Secretary General said, and I quote, "Global hunger has reached record levels. As we end this year 2022, famine looms in 5 separate places around the world. And in every crisis, women and girls are the last to eat and the first to suffer poverty and hunger." So thank you, Concern Worldwide. Thank you, Welthungerhilfe, for continuing to shine a brilliant and devastating spotlight on our increasingly hungry world. Well, as our friend did just say, there is also hope. So from the side of the United Nations, our efforts to end hunger take many forms here in Kenya. They're integral to our new United Nations Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework for the next 4 years, through which we aim to be even more focused and strategic than we ever have been before on food systems. We want to work together to strengthen Kenya's food security against this tidal wave of negative shocks, and I want to give you just a few illustrations, both humanitarian and developmental, of how we're trying to do that. With government at national and county levels, and with the support of the US government and other partners, the World Food Programme has already been able to provide a safety net to about 900,000, so almost 1 million people in drought-affected countries. They've been reaching, for the last 6 months, they've been targeting IPC4 families with cash transfer. And that's been complemented by investments with 2,000 villages, savings and loans associations, enabling about 44,000 people to improve their savings and investment capacities against this dramatic backdrop. FAO, Carla, my sister, is in the audience. Their support to the government of Kenya was already critical around another crisis, which was the desert locust infestation in 2022. I'll pause to note that those of you that read your book of Revelations, I mean, it sometimes feels as though Kenya is being visited by all 4 horsemen of the apocalypse at the same time. Perhaps we haven't had fire yet. But with the invasion of the desert locusts, FAO was able to mobilize about $24 million from 18 different international partners. 19 million hectares were surveyed, 212,000 were treated, and we estimate that that avoided about 11,000 hectares of Kenyan crops that would otherwise have been lost, with a value of about $3.4 million. More than 75,000 people were then able to meet their annual cereal needs in 2022, 5,500 households able to feed their livestock and produce milk. Mariatu, IFAD, also very active in this space, of course, implementing a country program that strengthens participation and benefits for the rural poor in selected value chains. That's around cereal, livestock, fisheries, horticulture. And I think most critically, and that leads us on to the path ahead, because it's so easy to get mired in the humanitarian dimensions of this, Their program is helping to employ climate-resilient, inclusive and pro-poor approaches so that we can actually bolster Kenya's productive potential for future generations. I'll wind up that roll call of UN activity by mentioning UNICEF, our lead agency on nutrition, who've been responding to the nutritional dimensions of this deep drought crisis. In 2022 alone, 123,000 people, including 63,000 girls, reached with nutritional support. We know that the numbers around severe acute malnutrition and moderate acute malnutrition are rising dramatically. And we know that in 2023, if nothing is done, we're facing almost 6 million Kenyans in deep food insecurity. So, as I conclude, friends, there's a Swahili proverb that always makes me stop to think. Ajizi nyumba ya njaa, which means indecision or inaction is the house of hunger. We have to double down. Because of the climate emergency's devastating impacts, if we don't help Kenya to engender transformative change, then food systems will continue to weaken, leading to further rises in the numbers of people needing humanitarian assistance. And that global humanitarian overview already noted that the world's humanitarian bill for 2023 is going to be the biggest ever. And let me remind you, that was before the Turkey-Syria earthquake. So we know that the humanitarian needs are going to swell, but we know if we do nothing, ajizi nyumba ya njaa, if we do nothing, it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So we need transformative change. We need strengthened food systems. We need climate-smart agriculture because the climate emergency is not going away. And we need financing for that. Now, some baby steps were taken at COP27 with the establishment of a fund to meet the challenges of loss and damage. Thank you, European Union, for being the pioneer donor to that, but you'll forgive me if I say that the initial financial allocation ain't going to go very far. We need much, 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 much more from everybody around the world. We also need new partnerships with business, with the private sector, to help us transform agriculture in Kenya and on the continent. I was really struck when I was with the global director of the World Food Programme in Wajir a few months ago last year. We spent a very, very depressing morning going from one feeding centre to another and seeing people on the edge of ruin. And then suddenly we were taken to this bright green oasis. It was Alas Farm, a model farm supported by WFP and I think by FAO as well, in Wajir. And we were taken and shown these greenhouses, not even greenhouses, mesh enclosures, filled with just forests of beautiful dark green sukuma wiki, kale, cabbage, spinach. It was like we'd been teleported to somewhere else. And what was the difference? A functioning borehole with a solar pump. That was the only difference. The ground is perfectly fertile. The crops grew beautifully. It was water. And I'm particularly heartened that this government has come in recognizing the urgent need to work with all of us, with the United Nations, with international and national partners, with the private sector, to try to solve once and for all the challenge of sustainable water for the Assal counties. Looking back on 2022, I think many of us here had leading roles in the Food Systems Summit. That created the food systems pathways to which we're all committed, but we need to accelerate our journey along those pathways this year. We can't wait. It's high time we put collective zeal into reigniting our efforts to strengthen and transform Kenya's food systems, because the answer to what we've seen from the Global Hunger Index cannot be more humanitarian assistance. We need that, But we need more, we need different. So as I close, let us be thankful that we were able to avail of a very nice breakfast this morning, but I know all of us will be thinking about those who don't have that option here in Kenya, on the continent, and indeed around the world as we look at this global hunger index. And let us just remember, Ajizi Nyumba Yanja. Asanteni.
Thank you very much, Stephen Jacques, a new and resident coordinator right here in Kenya. How many remember the methali? Achizi? In English? If you don't do anything, inaction is the house of hunger. And I'm getting inspired. I have to take some action. Maybe I should start writing and memorizing methalis like I used to in primary school. Remember Insha? It used to be amazing there. But you say financing, partnerships. These are key pillars that we need to engage if we are to go towards sustainable food systems. Without wasting much time at this particular moment, I'd like to welcome Her Excellency Katrin Hagman, who is the EU Deputy Ambassador to Kenya, to give some brief remarks. Welcome. Thank you.
Asante sana. Good morning. It's always difficult to speak after Stephen, I have to say. My name is, as it was said, my name is Katrin Hagemann. I'm the Deputy Ambassador of the European here in Kenya. And I've been here for 3.5 years. And throughout these 3.5 years, I keep hearing about failed rainy seasons. So this has been one of the unfortunate things. It's been sort of not mentioned as much during the COVID pandemic because we were so focused on that, but de facto it's been here a topic that's been on my agenda for the entire time that I've been here. I am therefore delighted to be here today to participate in the launch of the 2022 Global Hunger Index report. This is a very important report. We use it, as many of you, I'm sure, also do, a report on monitoring and of the performance of the Sustainable Development Goal number 2 on ending hunger. As we approach the year 2030, the SDG 2, End Hunger, Achieve Food Security and Improved Nutrition, and Promote Sustainable Agriculture still appears rather elusive, as elaborated in some of the reports that I will be mentioning now. And I apologize if I will keep sort of repeating some of the things that have come before me and that I think Kelvin was also talk about after me, but we know that repetition is the mother of learning, so maybe this will also sink in deeper. The state of food security and nutrition in the world 2022 indicates that despite hopes that the world would emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic and food security would begin to improve, world hunger rose to as many as 828 million in 2021, following a sharp upturn in 2020 in the midst of the COVID pandemic. Severe food insecurity became more prevalent, with 11.7% of the global population facing food insecurity at severe levels. Similarly, the 2022 Global Food Report on Food Crises highlights the remarkable high severity and numbers of people in crisis or worse, IPC, CH phase 3 or above, or equivalent in 53 countries or territories, driven by persistent conflict, pre-existing and COVID-19 related economic shocks and weather extremes. I think we can add the locusts to that list as well. The 2022 Global Food Security Index shows that the global food environment is deteriorating. After hitting its highest score in 2019, the Global Food Security Index has since declined amid skyrocketing food prices and hunger on unprecedented scale. In particular, The reports indicate poverty and inequality as underlying structural causes of food insecurity and malnutrition in all its forms, in turn amplifying the tension that can fan the flames of instability and conflict. Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine has worsened the global economy, triggering high price increases of essential commodities to unprecedented levels. This in turn exploded the cost of living, further pushing already vulnerable populations into abject poverty. Turning to Kenya, the situation is not too different. The country is currently experiencing a severe drought following 5 failed rainy seasons, especially in the Asals. Recent data of November 2022 on the 23 Asal counties indicates that 14 counties are at alarm phase, 7 at alert phase, and only 2 at normal phase. The situation is exacerbated in some areas by insecurity due to armed conflicts and cattle rustling, causing increased food and nutrition insecurity and poverty. This notwithstanding, the 2022 Kenya Demographic and Health Survey, launched recently, which indicates that the national prevalence of stunting of children under the age of 5 improved, and we've seen a very nice graph of that, and is now at 18% in 2022, down from 26% in 2014, while the prevalence of underweight children also decreased slightly, down from 11% reported in 2014. We're still having a little bit of an issue on wasting, where there has been a slight increase. These figures have overall improved compared to the ones reported in 2014 due to a concerted investment in food and nutrition security by both the government and by us, the development partners. A 2019 study done in Kenya on the cost of hunger in Africa revealed that, in total, taking into account health, education, and productivity, nearly 374 billion Kenyan shilling, or $4.2 billion was lost in the year 2014. It's been a while, but I think the numbers will not be too different if we do it again. So $4.2 billion were lost in Kenya in that year as a result of child undernutrition. This was equivalent to 6.9% of GDP in 2014. So this is not a side issue. This is something that is so connected to everything that this government wants to do. To support the Kenya government address drought emergencies, the EU supports the National Drought Management Authority, NDMA, in drought risk management, as well as in the implementation of resilience building activities in all 23 Asal counties. In addition, the EU is supporting resilience building interventions in some Asal counties implemented through NGOs, namely in Isiolo, Baringo, Tana River, and West Pokot. We also support integrated peace and resilience activities in Mandera under cross-border peace initiatives. Specifically in the area of nutrition, we are partnering with the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, the KIPRA, and UNICEF on improved nutrition statistics for evidence-based policy making. We also support food fortification, which is an important way of dealing with micronutrition deficiencies in the country. We furthermore have projects working with refugees and the host communities, for example in Kakuma, where then the pictures look actually quite nice when you're going to these areas and you see that in Turkana you can actually grow, as you saw similarly in Wajir, you can grow things in these counties. What you need is water, good water harvesting, and a functioning system of shading and some sort of drip feed, etc. And I've seen tomatoes grown in Turkana. I mean, it really is amazing what you can do if you just have a little bit of water. Our humanitarian office, furthermore, is supporting the local production of nutritional commodities and complementary food that could be made available to actors responding to the drought crisis, as well as to local communities, as a safe and quality option to address the needs of young children in order to ensure they have access to nutrients they need for a healthy growth. We furthermore have had For the past, we've been very active in agriculture, and we've switched that a little bit to say green growth, to have more of a focus on climate-smart agriculture. But we've been active in that sector for a very long time here in Kenya, and we continue to do so. And this includes both support to small and medium farmers, but it also supports the really fantastic research institutes we have here, for example, on pest control, because we also need to make sure that what the farmers are doing and what is growing is not all being destroyed again through the various pests that do exist, unfortunately, here. Ladies and gentlemen, just as lasting peace cannot be built on a foundation of widespread hunger and malnutrition, likewise, the eradication of hunger and malnutrition will never be achieved in a context of heightened economic and political tension, let alone armed conflict. The pressing challenges we face is precisely to be part of efforts to break out of this vicious cycle and work in new and innovative ways. This is why it is important to look at the entire food system and focus also on the local level and work with the local government. It is therefore a very appropriate topic that you chose for this year's launch of the index. And I am very proud, as I said, to be part of that here. Let me therefore assure you that the EU will continue to partner with the Kenyan government to support sustainable food systems, transformation, and resilience building. I also call upon the Kenyan government and its partners to increase their support for nutritious diets of vulnerable groups, in particular for children less than 2 years old, as they are the most affected by drought crises due to its impact on cattle, availability of milk, and other related foods. I congratulate you for your work. I look forward to the launch, and asante sana.
Thank you very much, Her Excellency Catherine Hagman, EU Deputy Ambassador to Kenya. And it is that time for us to do a deep dive into this particular index. Without wasting much time, I'd like to welcome Calvin Shingles, who is the Country Director, WHH, to take us through this session. Welcome, Calvin.
Thank you very much, Noah. Good morning. Habari asubuhi. And for our German colleagues, since we've mentioned the Irish already, guten Morgen. Today I have the auspicious occasion to be able to launch the 17th edition of the Global Hunger Index. It's a GHI peer-reviewed report published by Welthungerhilfe and Concern Worldwide on an annual basis. The report measures and tracks long-term trends of hunger on a global, regional and national level. As authors of this series, and together with our Alliance 2015 partners, our aim is to raise awareness about the scale of hunger, to share effective approaches in fighting hunger, and above all, provide incentives to act. We wish to continue the conversation with diverse stakeholders, such as those who are on our panel today, to help change the course and find solutions to tackle hunger. In the next few minutes, I will explain the index itself, give you an overview of this year's findings, and dive into the data from a few different perspectives. This year's report focuses on one important avenue for food systems transformation, which is the importance of rebuilding our food systems through the influence of local governance. This is particularly important for Kenya with the devolved function and responsibility of our various county governments. This year's report brings us face to face with a grim reality. The key takeaway and aim of this event is to make clear that our food systems in the current form are inadequate to sustainably end poverty and hunger. It's already been mentioned this morning that in 2021, we highlighted the effects of the locust outbreak on production, the droughts and the impact of climate change, and the COVID-19 pandemic, all affecting food security in Kenya. In the past year, 2022, we have seen the impacts of the Ukraine crisis and the increased cost of basic commodities and staple food items here in Kenya. This, coupled with the continued drought situation now in 2023, is making food security out of reach of many poor families. It is therefore critical to act now to rebuild food security on a new and lasting basis. By investing in an urgently needed transformation towards equitable, inclusive, and sustainable food systems. There is no doubt that the transformation of food systems requires drastic intervention on multiple levels. In Kenya, we can see productivity, but we also witness too often food wastage and food losses. From the Kenya perspective, the understanding and contextualization of the food system still requires clear understanding of the gaps and contributing factors to ensure sustainable food system is developed and led by local governance. Already this morning, we have heard and has been mentioned about the high-level meetings, the UN Food System Summit, the COP27, the Nutrition for Growth Summit, all reaffirming the long-standing structural deficiencies when it comes to food systems and the global food system itself. It is worth highlighting that Kenya has committed to ending hunger by 2030 and has prioritised actions and pathways to transform food systems in Kenya through the Kenya Food Systems Call to Action position paper. It is indeed time to call to action and enact these commitments. This year's GHA report highlights the transformation will only succeed if communities, civil society organisations, smallholder producer groups and Indigenous groups with their local knowledge and their lived experiences can shape how food is governed. I trust our panel this morning will be able to address these areas in much greater detail. But first, let us look at this year's GHI scores and data. First of all, it's important to understand how the GHI is put together. And here I point you to the circles at the top of the slide. Our index combines 4 indicators. Why? To capture the complex and multi-dimensional nature of hunger. They not only reflect the calorie availability, but they also the quality and utilization of food and deficiencies of essential vitamins and minerals. And it's worth noting that these same indicators are also included in measuring progress towards the Sustainable Development Goal 2 of zero hunger. So the indicators are the share of the population that is undernourished, that have insufficient caloric intake or inadequate food supply. Second, it looks at child stunting, the percentage of children under 5 that have low height for age, an indicator of chronic undernutrition or long-term effects of deficiencies of calories or lack of essential nutrients. It looks at child wasting, again the percentage of children under 5 with low weight for height, reflecting acute undernutrition leading to malnutrition within the population of this segment. And finally, it looks at children's mortality, the most tragic consequence of hunger and undernutrition. Those children under 5 that die before they reach the age of 5. At the bottom of the screen, I hope some of you can see it, this calculation results in a score on a 100-point scale that reflects the severity of hunger from low to extremely alarming, where 0 is the best score, no hunger, and 100 is the very worst score. An increase in a country's GHI score indicates that the hunger situation is worsening, while a decrease in the score indicates improvement in the country's hunger situation. It's important to note at this point, we only use official published data, while I have also taken data from other sources to give an overall picture of the situation here in Kenya. Next slide. So here's the bigger picture, the results of this year's index. I've heard the word this morning, stark. Yes, it's a stark picture showing 44 countries in which hunger is either serious or alarming. Hunger is at alarming levels in 5 countries: the Central African Republic, Chad, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Madagascar, and Yemen, and is provisionally considered alarming in 4 additional countries: Burundi, Somalia, South Sudan, and Syria. A further 35 countries' hunger is considered serious based on the GHI report of 2022. Where does Kenya rank in the GHI? In the 2022 Global Hunger Index, Kenya ranks 94th out of 121 countries with sufficient data. With a score of 23.5, Kenya has a level of hunger that is regarded as serious. You will see in the slide to the right that in the period between 2014 and 2022, the GHI score for Kenya rises again, indicating that the progress and fight against hunger is reversing. Whether this can be attributed to climate change, inadequate and unsustaining food systems, or an increasing population, our panel this morning will be able to adequately inform us. The state of food security and nutrition in the world and the Global Report on Food Crisis 2022 have already sounded the alarm. The GHI now adds to this analysis and provides the last wake-up call. This year's Global Hunger Index shows that after decades of global hunger reduction, progress has nearly come to a halt. At this stage, can I just have you upstanding? I would like to welcome our chief guest, His Excellency, Honourable Musalia Mudavadi. It's a pleasure to have you with us this morning, sir. Thank you for joining. Although the GHI score shows that global hunger has been on the decline since 2000, progress is slowing. The GHI shows that after decades of decline, the global prevalence of undernourishment, one of the 4 indicators used to calculate the GHI scores, show that global hunger has been on the global hunger is increasing. This shift is the first negative sign of decline that may influence other measures of hunger. In Kenya, the prevalence of undernourishment stands at 27%. This means from a population of 50 million, almost 1/3 do not acquire enough caloric intake to sustain a healthy and productive life. To reaffirm this statement, the Kenya Institute for Public Policy Research and Analysis, KIPRA, estimates that 14.5 million Kenyans are food insecure every year, while health outcomes are strongly linked to our food systems. Within the GHI, we measure the inclusion of both child wasting and child stunting. Also allows the GHI to document both acute and chronic undernutrition. The GHI shows that even before the drought crisis hit, undernutrition is a significant concern, and identified hotspots have been highlighted in areas of West Pokot, Kitui, Samburu, and surprisingly Kilifi, having significant rates of stunting in children under 5. Again, an indicator for chronic or long-term undernutrition. However, countrywide, we have seen positive progress, which is documented within the KDHS 2022. When it comes to acute malnutrition in Kenya, currently the national average is 5%. But we continue to see an increasing number of children suffering from malnutrition, particularly in the arid and semi-arid lands where counties are continuing to record high malnutrition rates over the emergency threshold of 15%, reaching greater than 30% in some cases year in and year out. The trend of Kenya's GHI score is reflected in these 4 components or indicators: undernourishment, child wasting, child stunting, and child mortality. Kenya's rise in the GHI score is largely due to the dramatic increase in prevalence of undernourishment at a high level within the population. On a positive note, as I've already mentioned, Kenya's child stunting rate is steadily decreasing compared to previous years, and significant progress has been made. In East Africa, Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia, we're experiencing one of the most severe droughts that we've seen in the past 40 years, threatening the survival of millions. Climate change and the atmospheric phenomenon of La Nina have contributed to severe rainfall shortages over the past 5 consecutive rainy seasons since late 2020. The drought conditions are predicted to continue in early 2023, March, April, May. This year, within the document, the GHI report, you will see an essay by Danielle Resnick providing promising examples of a variety of settings where citizens are finding innovative ways of amplifying their voices in food systems debates. First, she highlights why focusing on local governance and food systems is important. One important aspect is that consumption patterns, natural resource management practices, farming and livestock practices are often based on local cultural traditions. Moreover, forms of local governance provide benchmark for whether government priorities reflect local needs and preferences. In addition, a recent trend towards decentralizing government functions has given local governments, and in our context, county governments, greater autonomy and authority to steer key elements of the Kenya food systems. Therefore, local action has the potential to help citizens realize the right to food, but they are often unaware of this right, even where there has been enshrined in national law. It is thus important to highlight local government's responsibilities in ensuring a conducive environment for self-help capacities to be developed within the populations we aim to serve. The GHI 2022 therefore appeals to the Kenyan government that while there is urgent need to respond to the escalating humanitarian crisis, it must not lose sight of the need for long-term transformation of food systems in various contexts here in Kenya. Let us remember that the agricultural sector accounts for 22.7% of Kenya's GDP and 40% of its overall workforce. We know that directly or indirectly 70% of the population is engaged in agriculture. Therefore, we encourage that inclusive governance and accountability is at the centre of efforts to transform food systems. As Kenyans, we must respect, protect and fulfil the right of food, which is enshrined in Article 43, 1C of the Constitution. We must ensure citizens' participation, action and oversight. Stakeholders at the governance levels must harness local voices and capacities. Communities with their local knowledge should help shape how access to nutritious food is governed, while their capacities and good practices should be supported. We need to scale up resources to address pressing humanitarian needs while transforming food systems to make them resilient to these shocks. The Kenyan government, together with the support of the international community, needs to mobilise greater public support, increase investment in food systems, and provide more diverse sources of funding to meet escalating humanitarian needs, while at the same time scaling up essential resilience building efforts with the focus on a future sustainable system. At this juncture, I'd like to thank you very much for listening. I'm sure we're going to have a fantastic debate this morning about some of the issues that we've presented already. And again, I'd like to welcome our chief guest to give his opening remarks, His Excellency, Honourable Musalia Mudavadi. It's a pleasure to have you in the room this morning. Sir, can you please give your keynote response?
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, my colleagues from the Kenyan government and members of the diplomatic corps and our other partners from the private sector and civil society who are here today. First of all, let me extend an apology. I should have been here earlier, but I also got a visit from the visiting Japanese Vice Minister. So we had to engage a little, but I hope I have not lost too much. However, when I got the message that I should participate in this engagement today, and it was talking about the Global Hunger Index, I realized that the matter is too serious for me, so I'll not dare make my remarks off the cuff. I'll need to make a statement that will go on record, because the issues here are extremely serious and we cannot afford to take them lightly. To the partners who have made this launch possible, my fellow colleagues in government, the UN agency representatives, embassies, dignitaries, donors, ladies and gentlemen. Today, we are looking at a grim combination of population growth, the global national income, or the gross national income, and the issues of hunger. In 2019, Kenya Population and Housing Census reports put our population at 47.5 million, roughly 48 million. But as at Monday this week, February the 6th, 2023, the Worldometer United Nations data reports that there are actually 56.8 million Kenyans today. That is to say, we have gained 9.3 million extra mouths to feed in 4 years, compared to a marginal increase in Kenya's gross national income from $1,830 in 2019 to $2,010 per capita in 2021. It means our population is growing at a faster rate of 19.6% than the country's 9.8% gross national income output. Within the cause and effect context, it means unemployment rate has increased, there is low or lack of incomes, and a high rate of dependency burden on the employed. The result is lack of savings and investments. Conversely, in 2019, 16.3 million Kenyans, that is about 34% of our population, lived below $2 per day. The number reduced to 17, or that is 8.9 million, in extreme poverty in 2022. However, what these figures reveal is not a decrease in the rate of extreme poverty between 2019 and 2023 in real terms. Rather, they reveal the cyclic nature of it. Further, because the gross national income didn't change, we actually gained another 9.3 million extra Kenyans on the extreme poverty assembly. This data presents an ugly picture of more poor people, an increase in the unemployment bracket, and poverty. This concurrently means more are eating poorer or with no food, or are in poor health. The Global Hunger Index ranking of Kenya at 94 out of 136 countries with a grim score of 23.5 is testimony to these prevailing facts. There is the agriculture jinx. When we talk of hunger, the next stop is agriculture. The jinx is, while agriculture counts for approximately 33% of Kenya's economic output and 40% of our overall workforce, mainly small-scale rural producers, and forms about 65% of Kenya's total exports, hunger is most prevalent among the same agricultural communities that also shoulder higher incidences of poverty in Kenya. Because the triad problems of poverty, hunger, and malnourishment are preponderant amongst the producers, the agricultural sector lends itself to two outcomes. First, poor producers cannot feed themselves. They cannot feed the country, but instead export their poverty to other segments of the population, thus poverty and hunger reproduction. And two, it is only logical that investments must be directed at beefing up productivity of the agricultural sector. Hunger is worsened by austerity measures brought about by the global economic slowdown, underpinned by the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict, elevated global inflation, and the lingering effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and climate change-related supply chain disruptions. It's also worsened by the global increase in fuel, fertilizer, and food prices. Thirdly, it's also worsened by the constraints of recurrent drought affecting agricultural productivity. In fact, just sitting there to Jackson, within a few minutes, we were just pondering over what would happen if we are not careful. Not that we want disasters to prevail, but the sudden crisis about the earthquake in Turkey and Syria is now the global focus. Yet the drought and what we are talking about here is perhaps killing more people as we speak today. But so something maybe will come out of this meeting on how we should try and make sure that the world is alive to the challenges that we are facing now. I must also add that resulting from the climate change, Africa is faced with the worst drought in 40 years. Kenya's landmass is 84% ASAL, and even the remaining 16% hasn't been spared by drought. The seasonal rains have been scarce, sporadic, or never rained at all for about 3 years now. Dry spells have increased in intensity and geographically to cover the whole country. The drought is worse in 24 out of the 47 counties. This means the livestock economies in ASAL areas have been decimated, while sedentary regions have missed consecutive planting seasons. The already existing food supply chain deficits have been worsened by increases in food prices. This has brought those on the margins of extreme poverty into the food deficit category due to the severe poverty. Currently, rising temperatures will turn yet more of the country into desert if natural resource management strategies are not embraced. Considering food loss and waste across the food system, coupled with suboptimal production, we may only feed half of the projected population by 2030. Now, let's look briefly at the government mitigation of hunger in the face of the drought. The government's response has been one, stepping up food supply in arid and other drought-ridden regions under the National Steering Committee on Drought Response to cushion communities affected by drought, making fertilizer available to improve productivity in the short rain season. Another 6 million bags of various types of fertilizer will also be available for the expected long rains. And this is absolutely critical that we achieve those targets. These are, of course, deliberate emergency and short-term relief strategies designed to rein in hunger by revamping food chain systems, increase sedentary productivity, reduce cost of food, and ultimately tackle poverty, hunger, and malnourishment health issues. These initiatives provide short-term relief for the immediate problem of hunger. However, a more wholesome approach to reducing hunger is in the government's economic recovery agenda, geared towards the economic turnaround and inclusive growth. The agenda aims to increase investments in 5 sectors with the largest impact on the economy and household welfare. At the top is agriculture, followed by micro, small and medium enterprises, housing and settlement, healthcare, digital superhighway, and the creative industry. Under the agricultural transformation and inclusive growth agenda, the government seeks to, among other interventions, deal with the underlying causes of food and nutrition insecurity. These causes include poverty, climate change, which often manifests as drought, dependency on rain-fed agriculture, high cost of inputs, silo financing, and management of food systems, and gender inequality. Meanwhile, the government is also committed to creating an enabling environment that will build robust, inclusive, equitable, and sustainable food systems that will have a positive impact on people, their livelihoods, and the environment. We seek to provide a conducive environment for smallholder farmers, pastoralists, fisherfolk, and citizens in general to actively participate in realization of their rights to food as enshrined in Article 43 of the Constitution, which bestows on the citizens the right to be free from hunger and to have adequate food of acceptable quality. From a policy perspective, we will do this by effectively coordinating the entire range of the production, aggregation, processing, distribution, consumption, and disposal of food and waste, their interconnected activities, and their linkages with economic, social, and natural environments. As government, we know that smart management of multi-stakeholder actions of small-scale producers and vulnerable groups is crucial for achieving inclusive, equitable, and sustainable food systems that will fast-track our progress towards zero hunger by 2030 and achievement of sustainable development goals. The government therefore seeks to provide an enabling environment for agricultural productivity as part of the fight against hunger in developing policy, legal, and institutional reforms that will guarantee support to farmers in accessing quality inputs such as seeds, fertilizer, pesticides, among others, and also access to extension services to increase agriculture productivity. B, to increase the irrigable land from the current 670,000 acres to 3 million acres of food crops to guarantee food security. This will be a public-private partnership venture. I therefore invite the private sector to partner with government in ensuring we move the country from dependency on rain-fed agriculture and vulnerability to drought and the effects of climate change. C, we need to improve storage, preservation of milk, and access to markets by dairy farmers. This will offset the cost of feeds and bolster local economic turnaround, job creation, and reduce hunger. In this endeavor, we intend to reinstate the stalled milk coolers program and the distribution of 650 milk coolers across production areas in the country. D, we need to scale up of the seed multiplication for all crops and improve value addition in partnership with public and private research institutions. Ladies and gentlemen, I have deliberately picked on enhancing agricultural production as a way of fighting hunger because it is the low-hanging fruit among the multiple approaches government intends to apply to achieve equity. Focusing on agriculture and agricultural productivity immediately draws our attention because it has the greatest potential of not only generating food security and therefore enhancing the fight against hunger, but also has the highest multiplier effect on the country's gross national income through job creation and poverty reduction. So before I just make my last line, I had the opportunity to interact briefly with the World Food Programme. And in our conversation, when we thought that the refugee crisis was subsiding, and I'm sure Raymond here might attest to that, we don't have the exact figures, but maybe close to 100,000 of our neighbors from Somalia who are facing perhaps even a more severe situation have actually come back to Dadaab. Now, there are multiple challenges here. There's the issue of the food and water that they must get, but there's also the twin problem of security because we have the Al-Shabaab menace and we're not sure that everybody coming in has the intentions of dealing with hunger. Maybe others have other intentions. So these are emerging issues that we really have to deal with collectively as a team. I want to make an appeal that we are not yet out of the woods. We are still in a very, very delicate situation, and definitely we need to continue supporting the Kenyans who are facing this challenge. The estimate is that about 4 million Kenyans are within that area, maybe different levels of intensity in terms of those that are facing the severe drought, others are on the borderline, but roughly 4 million Kenyans are in trouble. And of course in the region, I'm sure you have the statistics, if you take the entire region, that it's quite severe. And there are inherent security threats around this. We have come across, personally, I came across a member of parliament who was almost shedding tears in my office because they had lost a lot of livestock in a part of the country. So the need for intervention remains alive. The forecast is not yet positive that even when the rains do come, they may not be adequate enough. So I just want to flag that so that our friends and partners can keep the eye on the ball in this regard, so that we don't lose lives during this challenging period. So as we wait to see the actual data and figures, I would also want to wish wish you all positive deliberations, and to encourage you to share your information and your findings with government. At the end of the day, to make informed decisions, we must have timely and reliable data. Otherwise, we'll be groping in the dark. So if we can share the data we have, not just because we are launching the hunger index, but the other parameters and the necessary analytics that go with it, for us to make informed decisions collectively, we must have a free flow of reliable, accurate, or clean data that we can use to make good decisions and to make the proper interventions. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. May I formally inaugurate your session, and I look forward to scanning through the details of the index itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Musalia Mudavadi, the Prime Cabinet Secretary for the Republic of Kenya. At this particular moment, we'd like to, since you've already officially inaugurated our session, I kindly request you take a sip of water and kindly come forward so that we unveil this report. You say timely flow of data, and we're listening to you. We already have the data right now. So at this particular moment, Kevin Shingles will hand over the data to His Excellency. A round of applause. Thank you very much. I'll also request Mr. Stephen Jackson, UN Resident Coordinator, please approach, even as you take your cutaways on your phone. Her Excellency Catherine Hagman, please approach. Thank you very much. Dr. Raymond Omolo, please approach. I really appreciate. We also have Mr. Arshad Muhammad. I can see you are taking a little bit of photos. You can just flip the camera and take a selfie. Thank you very much. Have a moment there. And also, let us have Miss Kala Mukavi. She's already approached. Are we ready, everyone, with the report?
Can we have also Professor Mario Lakutsa?
Professor, please, a round of applause for Professor right there. Thank you very much. Okay, lovely. Let us once and for all of us just appreciate for this wonderful report. Let's put our hands together and we can smile to the cameras. I know it's a hunger report. We don't have to look hungry to the cameras. Amazing, amazing. We appreciate. Thank you very much. We can have our seats. God bless you. All right. Thank you very much, Professor. That's a good report, right? Can I borrow? Thank you very much. We are saying to solve this particular issue of hunger, we have to be generous amongst ourselves. I was just testing that. But at this particular moment, I'd like us to transition, because we said that the issue here is going deep. What are the solutions? And we have a wonderful panel today. As you can see from the sound man, he can tell that we have a wonderful panel. So at this particular moment, I'd like to welcome our beautiful panel, starting with Principal Secretary, State Department for Internal Security and National Administration, Dr. Raymond Omolo. Please come and just have a seat on the stage. Appreciate him as he approaches. Thank you very much, sir. Also, I'd like to welcome Josephat Kathiru Muhunyu, who is the Agriculture Secretary, State Department for Crop Development. Please appreciate him as he comes to the dais. Thank you very much. Ms. Kala Mukavi, Country Representative, FAO. Please approach the dais. We appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Let's also have Amos Nyakeo, who is the Deputy Director at the National Drought Management Authority in charge of drought contingency planning and response. Thank you very much, Mr. Amos. And let's have John Elungata, Secretary, Administration, State Department for Environment and climate change. Okay. Beautiful, beautiful panel. Gender balance. Shaky, right? And we're talking about representation in this issue of food security. And it's quite a concern because it's our mothers and our sisters that are most affected. All right? So, WHH, next time, let us have more ladies on the panel. But today, we're going to have this wonderful discussion. I'd like us to start off very briefly. For starters, Dr. Omolo, I'll start with you because you are at the center, and I'm told when the center is strong, everything holds together. The nexus between security and food security. Internal security, I know yours is there. And when you've not eaten, internally you're not secure, right? But also as a country, you're doing something about that. Talk to us about the nexus between those two worlds of internal security and food security.
Yes, so thank you once again. Now, internal security and of course food security. As internal security, first of all, our responsibility is to ensure that you are safe, but also secure in every respect. There is no bigger insecurity than food security. And a number of issues that we end up dealing with as a result of insecurity are primarily arising out of challenges that you have with food security. For example, if you look at the conflicts around the resources, either you are looking for food for the animals, there are those who have the pastoralists, and then you also have those who are growing food. And there's a whole spectrum of challenges that we deal with. The Prime Cabinet Secretary has just talked about the situation in the north, where you are having a lot of refugees coming in from Somalia. Now, when they come, then you also have the host community. So there's already pressure on the resources, and that becomes a source of conflict. And that then also leads to other things. The moment there's a challenge around food security, then people start to look for what are the alternatives. In Nairobi, we've had challenges with criminal gangs because people are literally looking out for themselves, and in the process, then the situation becomes unbearable. So in a nutshell, when you are looking at where we draw the line, is that we need to put a lot of efforts in trying to address the food security situation. And one of the things that we need to focus on is on agricultural production. As a ministry and a State Department, what are we doing about it? We spoke about the fertilizer subsidy distribution that is going on. And as we do the fertilizer distribution, do we even know who the farmers are? Do we know where the farmers are? We've just completed an exercise of registering farmers, working together with the Ministry of Agriculture, the State Department for Planning, and our ministry. Out of that exercise, we've been able to map out 4.6 million farmers across the entire spectrum of the country. Now, the fertilizer distribution program has begun this week. The Deputy President flagged off close to 300,000 bags of fertilizer that had come in. As of yesterday, over 50,000 bags have been distributed. And this is part of just being able to prepare so that when the rains come, we are able to improve our production. And I would say that beyond that, there's the need for us to plan and better prepare.
Okay.
When the produce is out, what is the mechanism of storage so that then we cut down on post-harvest losses?
Okay.
And the logistics around the supply, and as a ministry, one of the things then that we support with that is in terms of the logistics around it, but also making sure that it's secure. So if you're in the business of food production, how do we make sure that the environment is safe and secure for you to do this? Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you very much. Actually, when we talk about the situation that we have in the country right now, there is the issue of climate change. You've talked about the 3 C's, major C's. Climate change is part of that. Of course, COVID also is part of that. And I want to bring in from the Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Forestry, Mr. John Elungata. I know you are at the center when we talk about failed rains. It is a huge concern. And we don't control climate, but we can mitigate around that. So far, as a country, are we playing our part in making sure that our climatic systems is supporting a proper and sustainable food ecosystem?
Indeed, yes. You know that the State Department of Environment and Climate Change is the provider of climate information. You know, the Kenya Meteorological Department provides the data that farmers can be able to use to plan their agricultural activities. You know, with climate change, there is a disruption in the seasons. So, but with clear, concise data from the Met Department, well enabled, the farmers can be able to practice climate smart agriculture that can help feed the nation. Okay, and I'm glad because data is important. Even the Prime Cabinet Secretary has said we need sufficient data that is free-flowing for us to make critical decisions. I want to bring in the Minister of Health, but I know she's part of the roundtable. We'll be coming back to that later on. At this moment, let us move swiftly to the Ministry, actually, of East Africa, arid and semi-arid lands, and I know ourselves are the most affected when it comes to this issue of food insecurity in the country. Now, with these 4 failed rains, the stories are dire. I'm part of a newsroom, and the stories that we are telling, they are not encouraging at all. I know mitigations are there, but talk to us about this issue of arid and semi-arid areas, Mr. Amos Nyakeo, who's the Deputy Director, NDMA. Our response to drought situation, has it been sufficient?
Well, thank you very much. I would want to start by saying that probably we are experiencing a drought that we've not dealt with in recent years, because probably the worst drought that we would normally relate to was the episode that ran from 2009 to 2011. And for us, that was the biggest drought. But then now we are talking about up to 5 failed seasons. In the 2009-2011 drought, the cost of interventions and the losses were being estimated at close to 12 billion USD. When you look at that, it's an entire annual budget of Kenya. Right now, when you look at the interventions that have been mounted and the kind of losses that we've experienced, if we were to compare the 2 droughts, then you would appreciate that slightly we are talking about less impacts when you compare to the 2009-2011. And the whole reason is the mechanisms, the systems, and the responses that have been deployed have assumed a proactive approach by both government and development partners, and we would want to appreciate all the stakeholders that have come on board to support drought response. The private sector has also come on board very strongly this time. So we are seeing a more enhanced intervention, much as we are talking about the increasing drought response burden, and we are talking about us looking at a drought that is likely to keep us engaged until October this year. So again, it means we require to mobilize and deploy much more resources. So what we are saying is, yes, a lot has been done, but probably it's not enough.
Yes.
A lot has been done in terms of response. But then we need to appreciate that the response is basically consumption. We can never change the situation by investing more on consumption. We need to start thinking on how we change the situation permanently. And that is where, as was mentioned by the chief guest, we need to look at strategic partnerships that would deliver long-term enhanced capacities to deal with the drought risk, climate risk. And that is where partnerships with the government, with the private sector, should come into play, so that we are able to look at what is this that is the actual gap that leaves us exposed every time we face droughts.
Okay.
And then we can be sure that probably the next drought will be worse than this, because it's not about climate change now, it's about a changed climate reality already.
Okay.
So we need to really look at what we must do now to enhance capacities to deal with a drought of the current magnitude, and better still, to deal with an even worse drought. And as we speak about all this,
yes,
then it also means that we need to have the communities at the center of understanding their climate and drought risk, and making them in charge of their own destiny at that level, empowering them to be able to participate effectively in taking the steps to gain and accumulate capacities to cope with droughts and climate shocks, and also to rebound, and probably rebound to a better state than before.
All right.
Thank you.
And you know, when the country is starving, everyone looks at one place, the Ministry of Agriculture. Do we have food? We look at the Ministry of Agriculture. And I know, Josephat, you sit at actually the crop development sector. But in terms, because what I'm gaining from this, it's interconnectivity. I have to play my part as security to ensure that people are able to produce food. It's not just a one-man game. Talk to us about, is the Ministry of Agriculture getting the requisite support from the whole value chain to ensure that we are food secure as a country?
Thank you very much. Yes and no. First, I would say yes, because already as a ministry and other relevant ministries are able to have a dialogue where we are able to sit together. And to give an example, we did the agriculture marketing strategy together. We also did the irrigation policy together as a government, and in this case, focusing on the value chain, as you have rightfully said. You know, value chain is in terms of a specific enterprise, like if it is a specific crop, but we also have the food value chain itself, where we have to ask ourselves, what is involved in getting that food on the table? Again, looking at the value chain approach, you find that we have what we call value chain nodes. To give an example, for maize, where does maize start? It starts with the land. Land preparation. It has to be done well. Then after land preparation, we go to the inputs. Again, these inputs must be correct and well matched, because you may have the correct fertilizer, but the wrong seed. But again, you may have all that, but there is no rain, there is no water. Also, we have found that the pests and diseases have kind of changed their pattern, not what we used to have. Right now, we are having innovations, as you all know. And more to this, even the post-harvest management. We lose a lot of our harvest because of how we handle the post-harvest. And more to this, again, lack of value addition and processing means that as we lose the produce, we also have low value products. So in this case, we are working closely, first of all, to identify for each enterprise who are the key stakeholders in the value chain, so that we are able to sit with them. And I'm happy our chief guest brought this out very clearly, that we need to look at the whole spectrum for us to handle this. And more critical, and that is where we are having a big challenge, is that if you look at our food system ecosystem, over 83% of our land mass is ASAL. So the remaining small bit is where we are having our urban centers and where we are constructing and therefore transforming the productive land to settlements and buildings. Again, this has really brought a lot of challenge. For those of you who are in Nairobi 20 years ago, linking Nairobi to Kiambu, you could see very good farms. So right now, you see buildings.
Yeah.
So the question would be, how therefore can we take advantage of the 83% of the ASAL and easily ensuring that we start thinking around the concept of rain? Is it the rain we require or is it the water?
Okay.
And therefore, how can we convert rain into water? And that is what we really require. Thank you.
Okay, definitely. So you say there is support, but also there is more to be done. And one of the key issues that has been raised here has been the issue of partnerships and funding, because turning this whole thing around and transforming our food ecosystem and that whole value chain is very critical, but it takes funding, it takes donors, it takes people coming up and being intentional about it. And that's why I want to bring in Ms. Mukavi. The partnerships that we're seeing with different organizations pumping money into the country, some of the stories that we've seen here in those ASAL areas, people are doing vegetables, doing very well because of just putting a watering system and empowering the farmers. Are we seeing the results of those partnerships, and can it help us alleviate this issue of hunger in the country?
Thank you. First of all, to say that I'm happy to be the only woman balancing gender. And actually, is it okay?
Yes.
Yes, I'm happy to be the only woman in the panel balancing gender. And actually, just to remind that one of the reports of the FAO says that if we really support and if women had the same opportunities in terms of inputs and access, we would double production and productivity.
Yes.
So to say that we have to really, of course, support even more. But to say that really on partnerships, actually the 17 goal of the SDGs talks about partnerships. Because again, we cannot do this alone. The government cannot do this alone. The farmers that we are really targeting in order to improve their lives and livelihoods, they cannot do this alone. So we need really to come together, and that's why partnership is one of the SDGs. Of course, we know that the challenges are immense. The report is really highlighting that. We are talking about the triple threat, and actually now we are saying that is the fourth threat, because funding and financing is really one of the challenges that we are facing. We see climate change, that we lack that finance that can really help us to transform the agro-food systems. So there are best practices, there are successful stories, but we need to upscale in order to really see the impact that we aim. So it's really a call again for us to come together. Systematic approaches are really needed. Collaboration and coordination, actually enhancing the capacity of the government is one of our roles as UN, as FAO, so that of course they are really able to adopt the interventions that can really contribute to that change. Coordination, if we talk about, of course, the reality of Kenya, national and of course subnational, it is really critical, so that of course we can really also see the policy being, of course, adopted at the county level. The issue of really institutionalizations, so that those policies can also respond to their needs. So I really wanted to bring this issue of importance of the systemic approach and collaboration and coordination. But I would say that partnership is working. We see the donors, we see of course the UN agencies, we see private sector coming and again this is something that was really highlighted, and it's really so important that, of course, there is this enabling environment where we bring private sector also to help, because, of course, we're talking about creating jobs for young people. And we really have to have the private sector supporting this.
Okay.
So I would say that yes, it's there, but more is needed.
More.
The challenges are really immense.
Yes.
But I'm sure that we can do it.
Definitely. More is really needed. I mean, that's one of the issues that I'm getting here. And later on, we'll be opening up the floor. I'll be having my colleague, Jasmine Murani, who will be going round. In case you have any questions, just prepare yourself mentally, be straight to the point and direct it to a specific individual. We'll be having that engagement. So don't feel left out. If you have some concerns, we'll be having that back and forth engagement. But I want to go back to interior security, because security is very critical. And here we're talking also on local governance level. So in our situation as a country, Piesomolo, I mean, majority of our food that we eat day to day is produced by a smallholder farmer. These farmers are found in our counties, are found in our wards. In terms of that coordination from the national to the other level of government, are we having proper coordination that is empowering to our food systems?
So, I think first of all, as a country, agriculture is largely a devolved function. And therefore, the county government plays a very critical role in ensuring that we have enough food production. But also as a national government, we have a major role to play. Now, within the national government, of course, what we have is we have a mechanism of engagement at the county level. So you have the government, national government officers, but then also you have the county governments with their role that they play. Earlier on, I mentioned about the process of registration of farmers, and also now the rollout of the fertilizer subsidy program. And this we are doing in conjunction with the county government. So we are able to, first of all, share the information. For example, when we are doing the registration of farmers, the county governments know the number of farmers they have within their jurisdiction. That helps them in terms of when they are coming up with their programs, then they know the specific spaces to intervene.
Okay.
Away from that, what are some of the critical things that are necessary in making sure that we improve our production in agriculture? And one of the biggest requirements is water. Now, the government has an ambitious program of doing a number of mega dams and the small dams. And these are being done within the counties. So that linkage and collaboration is critical. Now, as a ministry, we have now captured some of the water infrastructure as critical infrastructure, so that then they are properly secured for us to be able to make maximum utility on them. And there's an issue around the seeds as well, because again, we need to be able to give farmers the right seeds for specific regions. As a national government, we are making this information available to the county governments. In a number of county governments, they have seed distribution programs, which then now we are able to have that linkage from the national government. So for example, we have the National Cereals and Produce Board and a number of other agencies within the Ministry of Agriculture working closely with the county governments. Then we have the cooperatives as well. Again, at the county level, they have the cooperative officers, and they even have executive officers directly dealing with the cooperative movement. Now, that linkage also has been provided within the national government infrastructure to ensure that the farmers are properly facilitated and supported.
Okay.
Then there's the issue around the enforcement in terms of the security arrangement at the county level. There is the county commissioners who chair the security committees. At the regional level, you have the regional commissioners, and they work closely with the county governments. And in terms of that, that also helps to ensure that the right thing is happening at the local level, where the biggest impact has to be seen.
All right, definitely very important. I want to bring in Amos Nyakeo. This issue of ending drought emergencies strategy, we decided that by 2022 we will be done with that. We will have accomplished the ending drought initiative strategy. So far, we are in 2023. I know there's been a lot of unprecedented occurrences across the world. Are we back on track?
I think I will pick it from the point of where were we before and where are we now? We were in a situation where we would have droughts and we will operate in a reactive manner. At the moment, we are more proactive. There is an active and fairly accurate drought early warning information system that is able to generate early warning. And when you hear people saying of 14 counties in alert, 14 counties in alarm, that is scientifically generated information from the early warning system. And we are able to accurately state the drought situation in the country. And not just in the ASAL counties, we have the capacity to do that even for counties that are outside the arid and semi-arid counties. Number two, we are lucky as a country that the meteorological services are also quite accurate now. I think it is long since you heard people saying manyunyu ya hapa na pale. We are no longer at manyunyu ya hapa na pale. Nowadays, the kind of forecasts that we get are such that you would think the meteorologists look out the window and they see and then they announce. They are so accurate, credit to them, and that information is becoming very useful for us.
Yes.
Coupling that with the drought early warning, then we are able to build fairly accurate scenarios and also to generate advisories that go to the communities to inform on what they should do at what particular time. Probably the gap that we have at the moment is how quickly the intended targets of such advisories are able to pick and make use of those advisories. It's an area that going forward we should find a way of strengthening. Dealing with drought risk involves financing. And if we are going to finance this, then we need mechanisms that avail resources to do that. Government has already established the National Drought Emergency Fund. It has been capitalized to some extent, and it is operating. And it's supposed to serve as a common basket for channeling of resources to address both the resilience capacity gaps and the response needs. And going forward, we expect that when all stakeholders are able to channel resources into this, then the fund will be quite healthy. And with that kind of outcome, then we should be able to see increased investments in capacities that help us to cope and recover from drought and climate shocks. Because this is what keeps eroding our food security nationally and at household level.
Definitely.
So this is in place. And then besides that, there is a very strong coordinating mechanism. There is also the issue of the institutionalization of the drought risk management. And that's why you can speak of National Drought Management Authority now. It was not there 11 years ago.
Okay.
Thank you.
Definitely. That's very, very important. And right now I'm being told we have to release some of our viewers on KTN News. Remember, this discussion is ongoing. We are just starting. Actually, we haven't even dug very deep into it. Remember, is the Global Hunger Index 2022. The situation is still dire. And as the chief guest said, we are not yet out of the woods. We still need to do something, even at a personal level. But at this particular moment, for our viewers at KTN News, thank you very much for accompanying us through this journey thus far. But we carry on. I release you with all grace. Thank you very much. Now, I want to come back to Matters Agricultural Department, and to be specific, this issue of extension services. Back in the day, small farmers were really empowered. I don't know whether that's the situation today, because if 80% of our food is being produced by these small farmers, then that should be the area of focus, how we empower them. Are there intentional strategic moves to empower that smallholder farmer?
KTN